The morning fog rolled across the beach at Naval Special Warfare Command as Sarah Martinez adjusted her gear for another day of what everyone called the toughest military training in the world. At 26, she had already proven herself in ways most people never would. Her journey to this moment had started 3 years earlier when the Department of Defense opened all combat positions to women, including the legendary Navy SEALs. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Texas where her father ran a construction company and her mother worked as a nurse. She learned early that respect came from what you could do, not what people expected you to do. By age 12, she could operate heavy machinery better than most grown men. By 16, she was teaching younger kids how to swim at the local YMCA and had earned her lifeguard certification. When other girls her age were worried about prom dates, Sarah was training for Olympic swimming trials. The path to SEAL training had not been direct. Sarah first joined the Navy as a hospital corpsman, following in her mother's footsteps in medical care. She excelled in her field, earning top scores in her class and quickly gaining the respect of her colleagues. During her first deployment to Afghanistan, she served with Marines in some of the most dangerous areas of the country. It was there that she first worked alongside Special Operations Forces and realized this was where she belonged. The decision to attempt SEAL training came after a particularly difficult mission. Sarah's medical unit had been attached to a reconnaissance team that came under heavy fire while trying to extract a wounded Afghan interpreter. When the team's medic was wounded early in the firefight, Sarah took over medical duties for both teams. Under intense enemy fire, she managed to stabilize 3 critically wounded soldiers and coordinated their evacuation. The SEAL team leader who worked with her that day later told her that he had never seen anyone perform under pressure like she had. "You should think about trying out for our teams," he had said during the helicopter ride back to base. "We need people who can think clearly when everything goes wrong." That conversation planted a seed that grew over the following months. Sarah began researching what it would take to qualify for SEAL training. The physical requirements were intimidating, but not impossible. She had always been an exceptional athlete, and her medical training had given her a deep understanding of how the human body worked under stress. More importantly, her combat experience had shown her that she could function effectively in life-or-death situations. The real challenge was not the physical preparation, but navigating the bureaucratic and cultural barriers. When Sarah first approached her commanding officer about applying for SEAL training, the response was polite but discouraging. "I admire your ambition," her co had said, "but you need to be realistic about what you're asking for. No woman has ever completed SEAL training. The failure rate for men is over 80%. Sarah had expected this response. She had done her research and knew the statistics. She also knew that until recently, women had not even been allowed to attempt the training. "I understand the challenges, sir," she had replied, "but I'd like the chance to try." What followed was months of additional preparation beyond what any male candidate faced. Sarah had to undergo extra psychological evaluations, additional medical examinations, and even meetings with Pentagon officials who wanted to understand her motivations. Some of these sessions felt more like interrogations than interviews. "What are you trying to prove?" one official had asked during a particularly tense meeting. "Do you understand that your failure could be used as evidence that women don't belong in special operations?" Sarah had looked the man directly in the eye. "With respect, sir, my success or failure should be judged on my individual performance, not used to make assumptions about all women. Every man who fails SEAL training doesn't represent all men. I should be held to the same standard." The preparation phase became a full-time obsession. Sarah's typical day began at 4:30 a.m. with a 5-mile run, followed by swimming drills that pushed her beyond anything she had done as a competitive swimmer. She spent hours in the gym working on functional strength, training specifically designed for the challenges she would face. Evenings were dedicated to studying tactics, learning about SEAL history and traditions, and mental preparation. The swimming component was where Sarah knew she had a natural advantage. SEAL training included specific swimming requirements that eliminated many otherwise qualified candidates. Swimming 2 miles in the ocean wearing full gear, treading water for extended periods, and performing underwater navigation were all skills that played to Sarah's strengths. She had been swimming competitively since age 8 and had spent countless hours in pools, lakes, and oceans. But swimming ability alone would not be enough. The reputation of SEAL training was built on its ability to push candidates beyond their perceived limits through a combination of physical challenges, sleep deprivation, mental stress, and constant evaluation. Candidates faced everything from obstacle courses and long-distance runs to underwater demolition exercises and simulated combat scenarios. The training was designed to identify individuals who could perform effectively under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Sarah's medical background gave her insights that most candidates lacked. She understood how the body responded to extreme stress, how to manage pain and fatigue, and how to recognize the early signs of serious injuries. This knowledge would prove invaluable during training, but it also created additional pressure. As a medic, she would be expected to help other candidates when they were injured, even while dealing with her own challenges. The final weeks before reporting to training were the hardest. Sarah had to maintain her regular duties while completing her preparation. She also faced increasing attention from military media and outside observers who had learned about her upcoming attempt. Every interview and article seemed to focus on her gender rather than her qualifications, which frustrated her deeply. "I don't want to be known as the female SEAL candidate," she told her best friend during a phone call home. "I want to be known as a SEAL candidate who happens to be female. I want my performance to speak for itself." The night before reporting to Naval Special Warfare Command, Sarah lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the wounded soldiers she had treated in Afghanistan, the swimming competitions she had won as a teenager, and the countless hours of training that had prepared her for this moment. She was nervous, but not afraid. She had done everything possible to prepare herself for what was coming. When her alarm went off at 5 a.m., Sarah was already awake and ready. She put on her uniform, picked up her gear bag, and drove through the early morning darkness toward the base. As she approached the gate, she could see other candidates arriving for the same training class. Some looked confident, others appeared nervous, but all of them shared the same goal of earning the right to call themselves Navy SEALs. The guard at the gate checked her identification and pointed her toward the processing building. As Sarah walked across the base, she noticed how different everything felt from regular Navy installations. This place had a sense of purpose and intensity that was unlike anything she had experienced. The buildings were functional rather than impressive, and everything seemed designed with a specific mission in mind. Inside the processing building, Sarah joined a group of about 30 other candidates. She was the only woman in the group, but she had expected that. What surprised her was how normal the atmosphere felt. The other candidates were focused on their own preparation and seemed to accept her presence without comment. A few nodded in her direction, and one offered to help her with her gear bag, but otherwise, she was treated like any other candidate. The first official event was a simple formation where candidates were briefed on what to expect during the initial screening process. A senior instructor, a man with over 20 years of SEAL experience, addressed the group in a voice that commanded immediate attention. "For the next several weeks, you will be tested in ways you cannot imagine," he said, making eye contact with each candidate. "Some of you will quit before lunch today. Others will make it further before discovering that this training is not for them. A very few of you will earn the right to continue to the next phase of training." He paused and looked directly at Sarah for a moment before continuing. "You will be evaluated on your performance, not on your background, your connections, or anything else. The standards are the same for everyone, and they are not negotiable. If you cannot meet these standards, you will be removed from training. If you can meet them, you will continue. It's that simple." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and determination. The message was clear. She would succeed or fail based on her own efforts. That was all she had ever wanted, a fair chance to prove herself. The initial screening began with basic physical fitness tests that all candidates had to pass before being allowed to continue. Sarah had prepared extensively for these tests and felt confident in her abilities. The first challenge was a timed run that had eliminated many candidates in previous classes. As she lined up with the other candidates, Sarah felt the familiar pre-competition nervousness that she remembered from swimming meets. When the instructor gave the signal to begin, Sarah settled into a pace that felt sustainable. She had learned from her swimming background that starting too fast often led to poor finishes. As the group spread out over the course, she found herself running alongside several other candidates who seemed to be using similar strategies. The run took them along the beach and through parts of the base that Sarah had never seen. The Pacific Ocean was visible for most of the course, and the morning air was cool and refreshing. Sarah felt strong and focused, and she began to believe that she could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. As they approached the finish line, Sarah was surprised to find herself near the front of the group. She had not been trying to win the run, just to meet the required time, but her training had prepared her better than she had realized. When she crossed the finish line, the instructor recording times looked at his stopwatch and made a note on his clipboard without comment. The swimming portion of the screening came next, and this was where Sarah felt most confident. The test required candidates to swim a specific distance in the ocean while wearing boots and military uniforms. Many candidates struggled with this challenge because the clothing created significant drag in the water, and swimming in the ocean was different from swimming in a pool. Sarah had spent months preparing for this specific test. She had practiced swimming in various types of clothing and had spent time in the ocean learning how to deal with currents, waves, and when she entered the water, she felt immediately comfortable. The cold Pacific Ocean was familiar to her now, and she knew exactly how to pace herself for the required distance. As she swam, Sarah noticed that she was moving faster than most of the other candidates. Her technique was more efficient, and her experience in the water showed. She tried not to think about being watched and evaluated, focusing instead on her stroke technique and breathing rhythm. When she finished the swim, she was the third candidate to complete the test, and her time was well under the required standard. The physical screening continued with strength tests, agility exercises, and other challenges designed to evaluate basic fitness and coordination. Sarah performed well on all of these tests, but she knew that this was just the beginning. The real training had not started yet, and the challenges ahead would be much more difficult than anything she had faced so far. As the day progressed, several candidates were dismissed for failing to meet the minimum standards. Sarah watched as young men who had dreamed of becoming SEALs were told that their military careers would take different directions. Some accepted the news with dignity, while others were clearly devastated. Sarah realized that she was witnessing dreams being shattered and goals being abandoned. By the end of the first day, the original group of 30 candidates had been reduced to 22. Sarah was still among those selected to continue, but she knew that the real challenges had not begun yet. The instructors had been professional and fair in their evaluations, but she could sense that they were watching her more closely than the other candidates. That evening, Sarah called her parents to let them know how the first day had gone. Her father, who had initially been skeptical about her decision to attempt SEAL training, was now one of her strongest supporters. "How do you feel about it so far?" he asked. "It feels right," Sarah replied. "I know it's going to be incredibly difficult, but I feel like I belong here. I feel like I can do this." Her mother had a more practical concern. "Are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating enough and getting enough sleep?" Sarah laughed. "Mom, I'm fine. This is what I've been preparing for. I know how to take care of myself." After the phone call, Sarah spent time reviewing what she had learned during the first day. She made notes about the instructors, the other candidates, and the types of challenges she had faced. She wanted to be as prepared as possible for whatever came next. As she prepared for bed, Sarah thought about the instructor's words from that morning. The standards were the same for everyone, and they were not negotiable. She had proven today that she could meet those standards, but tomorrow would bring new challenges. She was ready for them. The second week of training brought challenges that tested every candidate in ways they had never experienced. Sarah woke each morning at 4 a.m. to the sound of instructors banging on metal trash cans and shouting orders. The days blended together in a haze of physical exhaustion, mental pressure, and constant evaluation. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. The infamous Hell Week was still ahead, but the current phase was designed to prepare candidates for that ultimate test. Each day included multiple training evolutions that pushed the limits of human endurance. Sarah found herself crawling through mud under barbed wire, carrying heavy boats over her head for miles, and completing obstacle courses that seemed designed by someone with a twisted imagination. What surprised Sarah most was not the physical difficulty of the training, but the psychological warfare employed by the instructors. They seemed to have an uncanny ability to identify each candidate's weaknesses and exploit them relentlessly. For some candidates, it was public humiliation during exercises. For others, it was being singled out for extra attention when they were already struggling. Sarah's challenge came in a different form. The instructors largely ignored her gender, treating her exactly like every other candidate. But she quickly realized that some of her fellow candidates were watching her more closely than they watched each other. A few seemed to be waiting for her to fail, while others appeared protective in ways that she found almost as troubling. During a particularly grueling boat carry exercise, Sarah noticed that David, one of the stronger candidates, was deliberately slowing his pace to match hers when they were paired together. When she confronted him about it during a brief rest period, his response frustrated her. "I'm just trying to help," David said. "We're all on the same team here." "I don't need help," Sarah replied firmly. "I need to prove that I can do this on my own. If you carry my weight, then I haven't really completed the exercise." David looked confused. "But if we work together, we both succeed." "If we work together because we both need each other, that's teamwork," Sarah explained. "If you carry my load because you think I can't handle it, that's charity. I didn't come here for charity." This conversation reflected a larger challenge that Sarah faced throughout training. Some candidates genuinely wanted to support her success, but their help sometimes undermined her ability to demonstrate her true capabilities. Other candidates seemed to resent her presence and made subtle comments about lowered standards or political correctness. The instructors appeared to be watching these dynamics carefully. Master Chief, the senior instructor, had over 15 years of experience training SEAL candidates. He had a reputation for being tough but fair, and candidates knew that his evaluation would largely determine their fate. During the third week, Master Chief pulled Sarah aside after a particularly difficult day of training. They walked to a quiet area overlooking the ocean, away from the other candidates and instructors. "How are you handling the pressure?" he asked without preamble. Sarah considered her answer carefully. She knew this was not a casual conversation. "I'm tired, hungry, and sore just like everyone else," she replied, "but I'm handling it." "That's not what I meant," Master Chief said. "How are you handling being the first woman to make it this far in training?" Sarah appreciated his directness. "It's challenging in ways I didn't expect," she admitted. "Some candidates treat me differently, either trying to help too much or hopping I'll fail. I just want to be evaluated on my performance." Master Chief nodded. "That's what I thought you'd say. Let me tell you something that might help you understand what's happening here." He paused and looked out at the ocean. SEAL teams work because every member trusts that every other member can do their job under pressure. That trust is built through shared experiences like this training. When candidates see you succeed, they start to believe that you belong here. When they see you struggle, some of them wonder if the standards have changed. Sarah felt a flash of anger. "The standards haven't changed. I'm meeting the same requirements as everyone else." "I know that," Master Chief replied calmly. "But some of them don't know that yet. You're going to have to prove it to them, not just to the instructors. That's not fair, but it's reality." He turned to face her directly. "Here's what I'm seeing in your performance. You're stronger than most candidates realize, including yourself. You've been holding back, trying not to stand out too much. That's a mistake. If you can outperform other candidates, you should. If you can carry more weight, swim faster, or solve problems better, you need to show that. Blending in won't earn their respect." This conversation marked a turning point in Sarah's approach to training. She had been trying to prove that she belonged by meeting the minimum standards consistently. Master Chief was telling her that she needed to exceed those standards to gain credibility with her peers. The next morning brought a new challenge that would test his advice. The candidates were tasked with a complex problem-solving exercise that combined physical challenges with tactical thinking. Teams of 4 candidates had to navigate an obstacle course while carrying a wounded teammate, then assault a mock enemy position using limited ammunition and supplies. Sarah found herself teamed with 3 candidates who had been among the most skeptical of her presence. Jake, a former college football player from Alabama. Tommy, a surfer from California who had enlisted to prove himself to his military family. And Johnson, an inner-city kid from Detroit who saw SEAL training as his path to a better life. The exercise began poorly for their team. Jake, who was accustomed to being the leader in group situations, immediately began giving orders without consulting the others. Tommy seemed more interested in looking good than in accomplishing the mission effectively, was clearly struggling with some aspects of the tactical planning. Sarah watched the dynamics for several minutes before speaking up. "We're approaching this wrong," she said during a brief planning session. Jake bristled. "What do you mean? I've got experience with this kind of tactical situation." "I don't doubt your experience," Sarah replied calmly. "But we're treating this like 4 individual exercises instead of one team exercise. look at what the instructors are evaluating." She pointed to the observer instructors who were taking notes on clipboards. "They're not just watching our physical performance. They're watching how we work together, how we adapt when things go wrong, and how we use everyone's strengths." Sarah quickly outlined her assessment of each team member's strengths and weaknesses, including her own. Jake was strong and had good tactical instincts, but he tried to do everything himself. Tommy was an excellent athlete with great balance and coordination, had grown up in an environment that taught him to think creatively about problem solving. Sarah's medical background gave her insights into treating casualties efficiently, and her swimming experience made her comfortable in water obstacles. "If we use everyone's strengths instead of trying to prove individual competence, we'll perform better as a team," Sarah concluded. Jake looked skeptical, but Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "She's got a point. I've been trying so hard to keep up with everyone else that I haven't been thinking about what I do best." "Agreed. Yeah, and I've been worried about the tactical stuff because I don't have military experience like some of you. But I know how to figure things out when resources are limited." Jake remained quiet for a moment, then surprised everyone. "Okay, let's try it your way. What do you suggest?" Sarah's plan involved using each team member's strength strategically rather than having everyone attempt every task. Jake would lead the tactical assault because of his experience. Tommy would handle the most technically difficult obstacles because of his athletic ability, would manage their limited resources, and look for creative solutions to unexpected problems. Sarah would handle medical care for their simulated casualty while also coordinating team movements. The plan worked better than anyone expected. Their team completed the exercise faster than any other group and with better tactical outcomes. More importantly, all 4 team members contributed meaningfully to their success. The instructors observing their performance took extensive notes, and Sarah noticed several positive nods. After the exercise, Jake approached Sarah privately. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been assuming that having a woman in our class meant the standards were being lowered. Today showed me that you're not just meeting the standards, you're exceeding them in ways that some of us aren't." This acknowledgement from Jake, who was respected by the other candidates, began to shift the dynamics within the training class. Sarah noticed that other candidates started including her more naturally in planning discussions and stopped offering unsolicited help during individual exercises. The change was most evident during a swimming exercise that took place later that week. Candidates had to swim several miles in the ocean while towing simulated equipment. This was exactly the type of challenge where Sarah's background gave her a significant advantage. As the exercise began, Sarah settled into a rhythm that felt comfortable for the long distance ahead. She had learned to pace herself for extended swims, and the water conditions were favorable. About halfway through the swim, she realized that she was moving faster than most of the other candidates without feeling particularly stressed. Rather than slowing down to blend in with the group, Sarah remembered Master Chief's advice about demonstrating her full capabilities. She maintained her pace and gradually moved toward the front of the group. By the final mile, she was clearly one of the strongest swimmers in the class. When Sarah reached the finish point, she was the second candidate to complete the swim, finishing just behind Tommy, who had surprised everyone with his ocean swimming ability. Her time was significantly under the required standard, and she had completed the swim while looking far less exhausted than most other candidates. Master Chief was waiting at the finish line with his ever-present clipboard. As Sarah climbed out of the water, he made a note and nodded approvingly. "Good swim, Martinez," he said simply. The reaction from other candidates was telling. Instead of the surprised look she had received after earlier successes, several candidates nodded as if her performance had confirmed something they already suspected. Jake clapped her on the shoulder and said, "Nice job, teammate." This exercise marked another turning point in Sarah's training experience. She had proven that she could excel in her areas of strength without apologizing for outperforming other candidates. She had also learned that earning respect required demonstrating competence consistently, not just meeting minimum standards. As the weeks progressed, Sarah found herself taking on informal leadership roles during team exercises. Her medical background proved valuable when candidates were injured during training, and her analytical approach to problem-solving helped teams develop better strategies for complex challenges. The instructors began giving her additional responsibilities that tested her leadership potential. During one exercise, She was placed in charge of a team that included several candidates who had initially been skeptical of her presence. Her job was to coordinate a simulated rescue mission that required precise timing and flawless execution. Sarah approached the challenge by leveraging everything she had learned about team dynamics during training. She assigned roles based on each candidate's demonstrated strengths rather than their preferences or previous experience. She also established clear communication protocols and backup plans for likely contingencies. The mission was a success, but what impressed the instructors most was Sarah's leadership style. She gave clear directions when necessary, but also listened to input from team members and adapted her plans based on changing conditions. When one candidate made a mistake that could have compromised the mission, Sarah quickly adjusted the team's approach without singling out the individual for criticism. After the exercise, Master Chief conducted a brief debrief with Sarah about her leadership performance. "You handled that well," he told her. "Good leaders adapt to their team rather than forcing their team to adapt to them. You demonstrated that today." Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond passing another training evolution. She was beginning to understand what it meant to be a SEAL team member, not just an individual who could meet the physical and mental standards of training. The psychological pressure of training continued to intensify as the class moved closer to Hell Week. Instructors began employing more sophisticated mental challenges designed to identify candidates who would break under extreme stress. Sleep deprivation became more severe, and the physical demands increased steadily. Sarah noticed that some candidates were beginning to show signs of serious strain. A few had developed stress injuries that required medical attention. Others were struggling with the mental pressure and had become withdrawn or irritable. The instructors watched these developments carefully, identifying candidates who might not be able to handle the ultimate test that lay ahead. During this period, Sarah's medical background proved valuable in ways she had not expected. She could recognize early signs of serious problems in other candidates and knew how to provide basic care that prevented minor injuries from becoming major problems. The instructors noticed her interventions and began consulting with her about candidates who were struggling physically. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of training, Master Chief asked Sarah to assist with evaluating a candidate who appeared to be developing a stress fracture. As they examined the candidate's injury, asked for her professional opinion about whether the individual could continue training safely. Sarah's assessment was thorough and honest. The candidate was developing a serious injury that would likely worsen with continued training, but he was also determined to continue regardless of the risk. Sarah recommended a medical evaluation and suggested modifications to the candidate's training schedule that might allow him to recover while staying in the program. "Good assessment," told her after the candidate had been sent for medical evaluation. "You understand that being a SEAL sometimes means making difficult decisions about your teammates' safety. That's exactly what you just did." This interaction reinforced Sarah's growing understanding that SEAL training was about more than individual performance. It was about developing the judgment and character necessary to make life-and-death decisions under pressure. She was being evaluated not just on her ability to meet physical standards, but on her potential to become the kind of person her teammates could trust with their lives. As the class prepared for Hell Week, Sarah felt more confident than she had at any point since training began. She had proven her physical capabilities, demonstrated leadership potential, and earned the respect of her fellow candidates and instructors. The ultimate test was still ahead, but she knew she was as ready as she could possibly be. Hell Week began on a Sunday evening with the sound of explosions, machine gun fire, and instructors screaming orders through bullhorns. Sarah had been expecting this moment for months, but nothing could have prepared her for the immediate assault on every sense. Bright lights flashed in her eyes, smoke filled the air, and the noise was so loud that communication became nearly impossible. The candidates were given 30 seconds to get dressed and fall into formation. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she pulled on her gear, not from fear but from adrenaline. She had trained for this moment obsessively, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of everything she was trying to accomplish. Hell Week was designed to push candidates beyond their breaking point through continuous activity, minimal sleep, and maximum stress. For the next 5.5 days, candidates would get fewer than 4 hours of sleep total while completing physically demanding exercises around the clock. Most candidates who quit SEAL training did so during Hell Week, and the instructors were experts at identifying the exact moment when someone reached their limit. The first night included what instructors called surf torture. Candidates had to lie in the frigid Pacific Ocean while waves crashed over them for hours at a time. The water temperature was approximately 50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause hypothermia in a relatively short time. Candidates who could not handle the cold were eliminated immediately. Sarah had prepared for this specific challenge by training in cold water for months. She understood how her body would react to the temperature and had developed mental techniques for managing the discomfort. As she lay in the surf with her classmates, she focused on controlling her breathing and maintaining her core body temperature through muscle tension and movement. Around her, she could hear other candidates struggling with the cold. Some were shivering uncontrollably, while others were already showing signs of hypothermia. The instructors watched carefully, pulling candidates from the water when they determined that continued exposure would be dangerous. After 2 hours in the surf, 3 candidates had been removed from training. The remaining candidates were ordered to complete a series of physical exercises designed to restore circulation and core body temperature. Sarah felt strong and alert, which surprised her given the intensity of the experience. The night continued with boat races along the beach, obstacle course runs, and calisthenics sessions that seemed to go on forever. By dawn, 2 more candidates had quit voluntarily, unable to continue with the physical demands. Sarah was tired but felt capable of continuing indefinitely. The first full day of Hell Week brought new challenges that tested different aspects of each candidate's endurance. Teams of candidates had to carry heavy rubber boats over their heads for miles along the beach, then paddle those boats through dangerous surf conditions. The boats weighed several hundred pounds when wet, and carrying them required perfect coordination among team members. Sarah's team consisted of 6 candidates, including Jake, who had become one of her strongest supporters, and 2 newer candidates who were struggling with the pace of training. The team dynamics during boat carry exercises would prove crucial to everyone's success. Early in the first boat carry, it became apparent that the 2 struggling candidates were becoming liabilities for the entire team. They could not maintain the pace set by the stronger candidates, and their technique was poor enough to make the boat carry more difficult for everyone. Jake and another candidate, Mike Torres, began to express frustration with their teammates' performance. "We're going to fail this evolution because of them," Jake whispered to Sarah during a brief rest period. Sarah recognized that this was exactly the kind of situation that Hell Week was designed to create. Teams that abandoned weaker members would ultimately fail, while teams that found ways to support struggling members would succeed. The instructors were watching for leadership, teamwork, and character under pressure. "We're not leaving anyone behind," Sarah told Jake firmly. "Let me work with them on their technique. If we can improve their efficiency, they'll be able to contribute more effectively." During the next rest period, Sarah quickly coached the 2 struggling candidates on proper boat carrying technique. She showed them how to position their hands for maximum leverage and how to coordinate their movements with the other team members. She also encouraged them to communicate when they needed brief breaks rather than simply falling behind. The improvements were immediate and significant. The team's pace increased noticeably, and the struggling candidates appeared more confident in their abilities. More importantly, the team began working as a cohesive unit rather than 4 strong candidates carrying 2 weak ones. Master Chief was observing this particular evolution closely, and Sarah noticed him taking extensive notes about her team's performance. When they completed the boat carry with one of the best times of any team, he nodded approvingly in her direction. The second night of Hell Week brought minimal sleep and maximum psychological pressure. Candidates were allowed to rest for 2 hours, but the instructors made sure that actual sleep was nearly impossible. They played loud music, flashed bright lights randomly, and conducted room inspections every 30 minutes that required candidates to stand at attention. Sarah found these sleep deprivation tactics particularly challenging because her medical training had taught her how important rest was for physical and mental performance. She could feel her body beginning to break down from the accumulated stress and exhaustion. Her reaction times were slower, her thinking was less clear, and her coordination was beginning to deteriorate. During this period, several more candidates quit training. Some simply walked up to instructors and announced that they were done. Others had to be removed for medical reasons when exhaustion led to injuries or dangerous mistakes. The class that had started Hell Week with 18 candidates was down to 12 by the end of the second day. The third day brought the most difficult physical challenges yet. Candidates had to complete a series of ocean swims in increasingly difficult conditions, followed by runs that covered dozens of miles along the beach. The accumulated fatigue from previous days made every movement more difficult, and the margin for error in dangerous exercises became smaller. It was during one of these ocean swims that Sarah encountered her most serious challenge of Hell Week. The surf conditions had deteriorated throughout the day, with waves reaching 8 to 10 feet in height. Swimming in these conditions required considerable skill and experience, even for well-rested swimmers. Sarah had been swimming near the middle of the group when she noticed that one of her classmates, Tommy, was in trouble. Tommy had been one of the stronger swimmers early in training, but the accumulated fatigue of Hell Week had affected his technique. He was struggling against a rip current and appeared to be panicking. The instructors had safety swimmers in the water, but they were positioned farther down the beach and might not reach Tommy in time if he went under. Sarah had to make a split-second decision about whether to continue with her own swim or divert to help her teammate. Her medical training and lifeguard experience took over immediately. Sarah changed course toward Tommy, fighting against the same current that was overwhelming him. When she reached him, she could see that he was exhausted and disoriented. He was fighting the current rather than working with it, which was draining his energy rapidly. "Stop fighting and listen to me," Sarah told Tommy, grabbing his arm to get his attention. "We're going to swim parallel to the beach until we get out of the current, then we'll head back to shore." Tommy was too exhausted to argue. He followed Sarah's lead as she guided them both away from the dangerous current and toward calmer water. The swim took several additional minutes, but they reached shore safely. Tommy was clearly shaken by the experience but was able to continue with training. Master Chief was waiting on the beach when they emerged from the water. He had observed the entire incident and had been prepared to send safety swimmers if the situation had deteriorated further. "Good job, Martinez," he told Sarah quietly. "That's exactly what we're looking for in a team member." Sarah's rescue of Tommy became a defining moment in her Hell Week experience. Word of the incident spread quickly among the remaining candidates, and her status within the group shifted noticeably. She was no longer seen as someone who might belong with the team. She was seen as someone the team could depend on in a crisis. The fourth day of Hell Week brought challenges that tested mental toughness as much as physical endurance. Candidates were required to complete complex problem-solving exercises while dealing with extreme fatigue and constant harassment from instructors. Many of these exercises had no clear solutions, and candidates were evaluated on how they approached problems rather than whether they solved them correctly. Sarah found that her analytical approach to problem-solving served her well during this phase. While other candidates became frustrated with exercises that seemed impossible, she remained calm and systematic in her thinking. Her medical training had taught her to make decisions quickly with incomplete information, which was exactly what these exercises required. During one particularly challenging exercise, candidates had to plan and execute a simulated rescue mission using limited resources and unclear intelligence. Sarah was selected as team leader for this evolution, which required coordinating the efforts of 5 other candidates while operating under extreme time pressure. The scenario involved rescuing a simulated hostage from a building while avoiding simulated enemy forces and dealing with simulated casualties among the rescue team. The exercise was designed to be chaotic and confusing, with instructors constantly changing conditions and providing conflicting information. Sarah's approach was to establish clear priorities and communication protocols before beginning the exercise. She assigned specific roles to each team member based on their demonstrated strengths and established simple signals for coordinating movements. Most importantly, she prepared contingency plans for likely complications. When the exercise began, everything went wrong immediately. The simulated enemy forces were in different positions than expected. One team member was declared wounded during the initial approach, and the rescue target was moved to a different location. Lesser teams might have panicked or abandoned their plans completely. Instead, Sarah's team adapted smoothly to the changing conditions. They implemented their contingency plans effectively, maintained communication despite the chaos, and successfully completed the mission objective. The instructors observing the exercise noted that the team had performed better than most SEAL teams would have under similar conditions. "Outstanding leadership," Master Chief told Sarah after the exercise. "You kept your team focused on the mission while adapting to changing conditions. That's exactly what we need in combat situations." The final day of Hell Week brought both relief and new concerns for the remaining candidates. They had survived the most difficult test in military training, but they also knew that their performance during Hell Week would largely determine their future in SEAL training. Some candidates who had struggled during the week would likely be removed from the program, while others would continue to more advanced phases of training. Sarah felt cautiously optimistic about her performance during Hell Week. She had met every physical challenge, demonstrated leadership capabilities, and earned the respect of her fellow candidates and instructors. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she could function effectively under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The week concluded with a final exercise that required candidates to work together as a single large team rather than as smaller groups. They had to transport heavy equipment across several miles of difficult terrain while meeting strict time requirements. The exercise was designed to test whether candidates could maintain teamwork and discipline even when they were at their absolute limits of endurance. Sarah found herself naturally taking on a coordinating role during this exercise. Her fellow candidates looked to her for guidance when problems arose, and the instructors gave her increasingly complex responsibilities. She realized that she was being evaluated not just as a potential SEAL team member, but as a potential leader within the special operations community. When the final exercise was completed, the surviving candidates were allowed to rest for the first time in nearly 6 days. Sarah was so exhausted that she fell asleep immediately, despite the adrenaline still flowing through her system. She slept for 14 hours straight, waking only when instructors announced that Hell Week was officially over. Of the 18 candidates who had started Hell Week, only 9 remained in the program. Sarah was among those 9, and her performance had been noted by every instructor involved in the training. She had not only survived the ultimate test of Navy SEAL training, but she had excelled in ways that surprised even her strongest supporters. Master Chief conducted individual debriefs with each surviving candidate, providing feedback on their Hell Week performance and guidance for the remaining phases of training. When Sarah's turn came, she expected a routine evaluation session. Instead, Master Chief began the conversation with an unexpected observation. "In my 15 years of conducting Hell Week, I've seen a lot of exceptional performances," he told her. "Your performance this week was among the best I've ever observed." Sarah was surprised by this assessment. She had known that she performed well, but she had not realized that her performance had been historically exceptional. "Thank you, Master Chief. What specifically did you observe?" "3 things," replied. "First, you maintained your physical performance throughout the week better than almost any candidate I've seen. Your times on individual exercises were consistently in the top 10%, and you showed minimal degradation due to fatigue." He paused to consult his notes. "Second, your leadership during team exercises was outstanding. You have an intuitive understanding of how to motivate people and coordinate group efforts under pressure. That's a rare skill that can't really be taught. But the most impressive thing," he continued, "was your judgment during crisis situations. When Tommy was in trouble during the swim, you made exactly the right decision at exactly the right time. You put your teammates' safety ahead of your own performance, which is what we expect from SEAL team members." Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had proven that she belonged in this elite community, not because standards had been lowered for her, but because she had exceeded the standards that applied to everyone. Hell Week was behind her, but she knew that the most challenging phases of training were still ahead. The weeks following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge for Sarah and her remaining classmates. The physical torture was largely over, replaced by technical training that would determine whether candidates could master the complex skills required of Navy SEALs. These phases tested intelligence, adaptability, and specialized knowledge rather than raw endurance. Sarah found herself excelling in the medical training portions of the curriculum. Her background as a hospital corpsman gave her a significant advantage over other candidates, but she discovered that SEAL medical training went far beyond anything she had learned in her previous military service. Combat medicine in special operations involved treating severe injuries under fire, performing emergency surgery with limited equipment, and managing medical emergencies in environments where traditional evacuation was impossible. During one particularly intense medical simulation, candidates were required to treat multiple casualties while under simulated enemy fire. The exercise took place in a mock village, where instructors playing enemy fighters used blank ammunition and explosives to create realistic combat conditions. Candidates had to locate wounded teammates, provide emergency medical care, and coordinate evacuations while maintaining defensive positions. Sarah was assigned as the primary medic for her team, with responsibility for treating all casualties during the exercise. Within minutes of the exercise beginning, 3 team members had been declared wounded, with various simulated injuries ranging from gunshot wounds to explosive trauma. The noise, confusion, and time pressure created an environment that was as close to real combat as training could safely provide. Drawing on her combat experience from Afghanistan, Sarah moved efficiently between casualties while providing clear instructions to other team members about defensive positioning and evacuation procedures. She quickly triaged the wounded, prioritizing treatment based on the severity of each injury and the likelihood of survival with immediate intervention. The most seriously wounded candidate had a simulated chest wound that required immediate surgery to prevent death. Sarah had practiced this specific procedure dozens of times during medical training, but performing it under simulated combat conditions tested her abilities in new ways. She had to maintain concentration on delicate medical tasks while explosions went off around her and instructors shouted conflicting orders. Working with makeshift equipment in a partially destroyed building, Sarah successfully stabilized all 3 casualties and coordinated their evacuation to a safe area. The exercise concluded with her team having suffered no simulated deaths and minimal additional injuries. Other teams had not performed as well, with some losing multiple team members to inadequate medical care. The instructor evaluating the medical aspects of the exercise was Lieutenant Commander Wells, a Navy doctor who had served with SEAL teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. She had seen real combat medicine performed under actual fire, and her standards for training were extremely high. "That was textbook combat medicine," she told Sarah after the exercise. "You maintained your focus under pressure and made correct decisions about priority of treatment. More importantly, you kept your team informed about what you were doing so they could support your efforts effectively." Lieutenant Commander Wells paused and consulted her evaluation notes. "I've been training SEAL medics for 8 years, and your performance today was exceptional. You have an intuitive understanding of trauma care that goes beyond your formal training. Where did you develop these skills?" Sarah explained her combat experience in Afghanistan and the real-world medical emergencies she had handled during her deployment. She described treating wounded soldiers under fire and the lessons she had learned about maintaining effectiveness under extreme pressure. "That explains a lot," Lieutenant Commander Wells replied. "Combat experience is invaluable for this type of training. Most candidates are learning these skills for the first time, while you're applying knowledge you've already tested in real situations." The conversation with Lieutenant Commander Wells was particularly meaningful because it represented recognition from someone who understood both the medical and combat aspects of Sarah's performance. Unlike some evaluations that focused primarily on whether she could meet minimum standards, this assessment recognized that she was bringing exceptional capabilities to the team. As training progressed into more advanced phases, Sarah discovered that her analytical approach to problem-solving gave her advantages in areas beyond medical training. The demolitions and explosives curriculum required candidates to master complex mathematical calculations while working with potentially dangerous materials. Many candidates struggled with the precision required for explosive calculations, but Sarah's methodical approach served her well. During a particularly challenging demolitions exercise, candidates had to calculate exact explosive charges needed to destroy various targets without causing collateral damage to nearby structures. The exercise was designed to simulate real-world scenarios where SEAL teams might need to destroy specific targets while protecting civilian buildings or friendly forces nearby. Sarah approached each calculation systematically, double-checking her mathematics and considering factors like wind direction, structural materials, and proximity to other buildings. While other candidates rushed through the calculations to save time, Sarah took the extra minutes needed to ensure accuracy. In demolition's work, small mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. When the exercise concluded, Sarah's calculations had been perfect on every target. Other candidates had achieved varying degrees of success, with some making errors that would have resulted in mission failure or civilian casualties in real situations. The demolition's instructor, Master Chief, noted her performance in his evaluation report. "Martinez has the most precise approach to demolition's calculations I've seen from a student," he wrote. "Her methodology ensures accuracy while maintaining appropriate speed for operational requirements. She would be an asset to any team conducting sensitive demolitions operations." The most challenging phase of advanced training involved underwater demolitions and combat swimming. Candidates had to master complex diving techniques, underwater navigation, and the placement of explosive charges while operating in zero visibility conditions. These skills were among the most technically demanding in the SEAL curriculum, and many otherwise qualified candidates failed to meet the required standards. Sarah's swimming background provided obvious advantages for the combat swimming portions of training, but underwater demolitions required different skills than she had previously developed. Working in complete darkness underwater while handling explosive materials demanded a level of precision and confidence that took weeks to develop. The training took place in a large underwater facility designed to simulate various combat diving scenarios. Candidates practiced placing charges on simulated ship hulls, underwater obstacles, and other targets while dealing with strong currents, limited air supplies, and communication difficulties. During one complex exercise, Sarah and her dive partner were required to navigate underwater for over half a mile to reach a target ship, place demolition charges in specific locations, and return to their starting point without being detected by simulated enemy forces. The exercise had to be completed in complete darkness using only compass navigation and predetermined timing. The underwater navigation proved to be more challenging than Sarah had expected. Swimming underwater in darkness while carrying heavy equipment was physically demanding, but maintaining precise navigation while dealing with currents and limited visibility required intense concentration. She had to trust her compass readings completely while resisting the natural tendency to surface and verify her position. Sarah and her partner reached the target ship successfully and began placing demolition charges according to their mission plan. The work had to be done by touch alone, as any light would risk detection by enemy forces. Each charge had to be positioned precisely and armed correctly, with no opportunity to verify the work visually. The return navigation was complicated by changes in current direction that had occurred during the time they spent at the target. Sarah had to adjust their return course based on estimated drift and timing, using techniques she had learned during advanced navigation training. When they finally surfaced at their designated recovery point, they were within 50 meters of their intended location. The exercise evaluation confirmed that Sarah and her partner had successfully completed one of the most difficult training evolutions in the underwater demolitions curriculum. Their navigation had been accurate, their demolitions placement was perfect, and their timing had met operational requirements exactly. Master Chief, who continued to monitor Sarah's progress throughout advanced training, noted her underwater performance in his ongoing evaluation. "Martinez has adapted to underwater demolitions training faster than any candidate I've observed," he wrote. "Her swimming experience provided initial advantages, but her technical precision and ability to work effectively under pressure have exceeded expectations." As advanced training neared completion, Sarah realized that she had developed capabilities that she never could have imagined when she first decided to attempt SEAL training. She could perform complex medical procedures under combat conditions, calculate and place demolition charges with precision, and navigate underwater in complete darkness while carrying out sensitive missions. More importantly, she had gained the confidence that came from knowing she could handle any situation that SEAL teams might encounter. The training had pushed her beyond her perceived limits and taught her that those limits were largely artificial constructs. When mission requirements demanded exceptional performance, she now knew that she could deliver it. The final major test of advanced training was a comprehensive exercise that required teams to combine all of their specialized skills in a single complex mission. The scenario involved infiltrating an enemy facility by water, conducting reconnaissance, destroying specific targets with demolition charges, and evacuating while avoiding enemy forces. Sarah was selected as team leader for this exercise, responsible for coordinating the efforts of 5 other candidates in what was essentially a miniature version of actual SEAL operations. The mission required underwater infiltration, land navigation, reconnaissance, demolitions, and tactical evacuation, every major skill area covered during training. The planning phase of the exercise tested Sarah's ability to coordinate complex logistics while managing the various specialties represented on her team. Each team member brought different strengths, and the mission plan had to utilize those strengths while compensating for individual weaknesses. Sarah approached the planning systematically, breaking the complex mission into discrete phases that could be executed independently while supporting the overall objective. She assigned responsibilities based on each team member's demonstrated capabilities during training, ensuring that critical tasks were handled by the most qualified individuals. The underwater infiltration phase went smoothly, with Sarah and her team navigating precisely to their intended landing site despite challenging water conditions. Their approach had been undetected, and they began the land navigation portion of the mission on schedule. Moving through unfamiliar terrain in darkness while carrying heavy equipment required careful coordination and navigation skills. Sarah had plotted their route to avoid likely enemy positions while maintaining access to their target facility. The team moved silently through several miles of difficult terrain without being detected by opposing forces. The reconnaissance phase of the mission required gathering specific intelligence about enemy positions and defensive measures while remaining unobserved. Sarah assigned her most experienced team member to lead this phase while she coordinated communications and prepared for the demolitions portion of the mission. When demolitions work began, Sarah took personal responsibility for the most technically challenging charges while supervising her team's work on secondary targets. The explosive calculations had to be perfect to ensure mission success while avoiding detection from the noise and flash of premature explosions. All charges were placed successfully and armed according to the mission timeline. Sarah's team began their tactical withdrawal, moving quickly but carefully toward their planned evacuation point. They had to cover several miles of terrain before enemy forces discovered evidence of their infiltration. The mission concluded with a successful evacuation that brought all team members safely back to friendly territory. Every mission objective had been accomplished within the timeline, and no team members had been captured or injured during the exercise. The evaluation of this final exercise was conducted by a panel of senior SEAL officers who had observed the entire mission. Their assessment would largely determine which candidates would be recommended for assignment to operational SEAL teams. Captain Michael Anderson, the senior evaluator, conducted Sarah's individual debrief. He had over 20 years of experience with SEAL operations and had commanded teams in combat operations around the world. "That was one of the most professionally executed training missions I've observed," Captain Anderson told Sarah. "Your team performed flawlessly in every phase of the operation. What impressed me most was your leadership style under pressure." He consulted his notes before continuing. "You demonstrated the ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining flexibility for changing conditions. Your team trusted your judgment completely, which is essential for operational effectiveness. Most importantly, you accomplished every mission objective while bringing all team members home safely." Captain Anderson's final comments surprised Sarah with their directness. "I've been following your progress throughout training, and I want you to know that your performance has been exceptional by any standard. You haven't just proven that women can complete SEAL training. You've demonstrated that you're among the best candidates we've trained regardless of gender." Advanced training was nearly complete, and Sarah had exceeded every standard and expectation placed before her. She had not only survived the most demanding military training in the world, but had emerged as one of the top performers in her class. The impossible dream that had begun with a conversation in a helicopter in Afghanistan was about to become reality. The graduation ceremony took place on a crisp morning with families, friends, and senior military officials gathered to witness the culmination of one of the most demanding training programs in the world. Sarah stood with her 8 remaining classmates, wearing the dress blue uniform that she had earned through months of extraordinary effort and determination. Of the 30 candidates who had begun the training pipeline, only 9 remained. Each had demonstrated exceptional physical capabilities, mental toughness, and technical competence. More importantly, they had proven that they could function as team members under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Sarah's parents had flown out from Texas for the ceremony, along with several colleagues from her previous unit who wanted to witness this historic moment. As she looked out at the audience, she saw Master Chief, Lieutenant Commander Wells, Captain Anderson, and dozens of other instructors who had evaluated her performance throughout training. The ceremony began with remarks from Admiral Jennifer Hayes, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command. Admiral Hayes had a distinguished career that included multiple combat deployments and senior leadership positions throughout the special operations community. Today, we recognize 9 individuals who have completed the most demanding training in our military, Admiral Hayes told the assembled audience. These new Navy SEALs have demonstrated that they possess the physical capabilities, mental toughness, and character necessary to serve in our most elite units. Admiral Hayes paused and looked directly at the 9 graduates. Your training is complete, but your education as Navy SEALs is just beginning. You will be assigned to operational teams where you will learn from experienced operators who have served in combat around the world. Listen to them, learn from them, and honor the traditions they will teach you. The individual recognition portion of the ceremony highlighted the achievements of each graduate during training. When Sarah's name was called, Admiral Hayes read from her training record with obvious pride. Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez distinguished herself throughout training with exceptional performance in every phase of the curriculum, Admiral Hayes announced. She completed Hell Week with the highest overall evaluation scores in her class, demonstrated outstanding leadership during advanced training exercises, and achieved perfect scores in combat medicine and underwater demolitions. Admiral Hayes continued reading from Sarah's record. During a critical moment in Hell Week, Petty Officer Martinez risked her own safety to rescue a struggling teammate during a dangerous ocean swimming exercise. Her quick thinking and decisive action prevented a potential tragedy, and the SEAL ethos of never leaving a teammate behind. The audience applauded as Sarah stepped forward to receive her SEAL Trident pin, the gold badge that identified her as a qualified Navy SEAL. Admiral Hayes pinned the trident to Sarah's uniform personally, a recognition that this was a historic moment for the Navy and the Special Operations community. "Congratulations, Sarah," Admiral Hayes said quietly as she pinned on the trident. "You've opened a door that will never be closed again. Other women will follow in your footsteps because of what you've accomplished here." After the ceremony, Sarah was surrounded by family members, fellow graduates, and instructors who wanted to congratulate her on her achievement. The conversations were emotional and meaningful, representing the culmination of a journey that had tested every aspect of her character and capabilities. Master Chief was among the first to approach her after the formal ceremony concluded. "I told you months ago that you would have to prove yourself not just to instructors, but to your teammates," he said. "You did more than that. You earned their respect by being the kind of person they want to serve with." Lieutenant Commander Wells, the medical instructor who had evaluated Sarah's combat medicine performance, had similar words of praise. "I've trained hundreds of SEAL medics over the years," she told Sarah. "Your medical skills are exceptional, but what makes you special is your ability to maintain those skills under pressure. Your teammates will trust you with their lives because you've proven that you deserve that trust." Captain Anderson, who had evaluated Sarah's final training exercise, provided perspective on what her achievement meant for the broader military community. "Your success here will open opportunities for women throughout the special operations community," he told her. "But more importantly, it will show everyone that capability matters more than assumptions." The most meaningful congratulations came from her fellow graduates, the 8 men who had endured the same training and witnessed her performance firsthand. Jake, who had initially been skeptical of her presence in training, was particularly generous in his praise. "I owe you an apology," Jake told Sarah during the reception following the ceremony. "I came into training thinking that having a woman in our class meant standards were being lowered. You proved that the opposite was true. Training with you made all of us better operators because you set such a high standard." Tommy, whom Sarah had rescued during Hell Week, had his own perspective on her achievement. "You saved my life during Hell Week," he told her. But more than that, you taught all of us what it means to be a teammate. I'm proud to call you a fellow SEAL." The other graduates echoed similar sentiments, recognizing that Sarah's presence in their class had elevated everyone's performance. They had witnessed her capabilities under the most extreme conditions and knew that she would be an asset to whatever team she joined. The assignment process for new SEAL graduates was based on the needs of operational teams and the specific skills demonstrated during training. Sarah's exceptional performance in medical training and underwater demolitions made her a particularly valuable candidate for teams conducting specialized missions. 2 weeks after graduation, Sarah received her assignment to SEAL Team 5, based in. The team specialized in maritime operations and had a distinguished history of successful missions in multiple theaters around the world. Her new commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander David Price, was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who had specifically requested her assignment to his team. "I've reviewed your training records extensively," Lieutenant Commander Price told Sarah during their initial meeting. "Your technical skills are outstanding, but what impressed me most was your leadership performance during training. I have several young SEALs on my team who could benefit from working with someone who demonstrates your level of professionalism." Lieutenant Commander Price explained that Sarah would be assigned to Alpha Platoon, a 16-man unit that had recently returned from deployment and was beginning preparation for their next overseas assignment. The platoon had an opening for a medic with advanced underwater capabilities, which matched Sarah's training background perfectly. "You should know that some members of the platoon have never worked with a female SEAL," Lieutenant Commander Price told her honestly. "That's not because they're opposed to it, but simply because you're the first woman to complete training. They're professionals, and they'll evaluate you based on your performance, not your gender." Sarah appreciated his directness. "That's all I've ever wanted, sir, the opportunity to prove myself through my work." The integration into Alpha Platoon went more smoothly than Sarah had dared to hope. The platoon chief, Senior Chief Petty Officer Williams, was a 20-year veteran who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other classified locations around the world. His approach to leadership was based on competence and reliability rather than personality or politics. "I don't care if you're male, female, purple, or green," Senior Chief Williams told Sarah during her first platoon meeting. "What I care about is whether you can do your job when it matters. Your training record suggests that you can, so we'll start from there." The other platoon members were similarly professional in their approach to Sarah's integration into the team. They had all reviewed her training evaluations and were aware of her exceptional performance during SEAL training. Their primary concern was whether she could maintain that level of performance during operational deployments. Sarah's first major test with the platoon came during a complex training exercise conducted in partnership with foreign special operations forces. The scenario involved multiple teams conducting coordinated maritime infiltrations, followed by land-based operations against simulated terrorist targets. Sarah was assigned as the primary medic for her squad's portion of the mission, with additional responsibilities for underwater reconnaissance of the target facility. The exercise would test both her technical skills and her ability to integrate with teammates she was still getting to know. The maritime infiltration phase of the exercise went perfectly. Sarah and her squad navigated underwater for over a mile to reach their assigned objective, maintaining precise navigation and timing despite challenging weather conditions. Her underwater performance impressed the foreign operators who were observing the exercise as part of their own training. Once on land, the exercise became more complex as multiple squads had to coordinate their movements while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Sarah's role involved providing medical support while also conducting reconnaissance of enemy positions using specialized equipment. During the reconnaissance phase, Sarah discovered that the opposing forces had repositioned several defensive positions since the initial intelligence briefing. This information was critical for the success of the overall mission, and she had to communicate her findings quickly and accurately to the mission commanders. Working with her squad leader, Sarah developed an updated assault plan that accounted for the new enemy positions while maintaining the element of surprise. Her recommendations were based on her observations of enemy capabilities and the terrain around the target facility. The assault phase of the exercise tested everyone's ability to execute complex tactics under pressure while maintaining safety protocols. Sarah's squad was responsible for securing the primary target building, while other squads handled external security and potential escape routes. As the squad's medic, Sarah had to position herself where she could provide immediate medical support while also contributing to the tactical success of the mission. This required careful coordination with her squad leader and constant awareness of changing tactical conditions. The exercise concluded with a complete success for all participating units. Every objective had been accomplished within the timeline, and no participants had been injured during the complex training evolution. More importantly, the foreign observers had been impressed with the professionalism and capabilities of the American forces. Senior Chief Williams conducted a detailed debrief with Sarah after the exercise, providing feedback on her performance and integration with the platoon. His assessment was overwhelmingly positive. "Your technical performance was flawless," he told her. "But what impressed me most was how naturally you worked with the team. Good operators make everyone around them better, and that's what you did during this exercise." He consulted his notes before continuing. "Your reconnaissance work probably saved the mission. The intelligence you gathered allowed us to modify our tactics in real time, which is exactly what we need from team members during actual operations." Senior Chief Williams concluded with observations about Sarah's future with the platoon. "I've worked with a lot of SEALs over the years, and you have the instincts and judgment that separate good operators from great ones. The team trusts you completely, which is the highest compliment I can give." This exercise marked Sarah's full integration into Alpha Platoon as an operational SEAL team member. She had proven that her exceptional training performance could be sustained during realistic operational scenarios. More importantly, she had demonstrated that she could work effectively with experienced operators who initially knew her only by reputation. As Alpha Platoon prepared for their next deployment, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small town in Texas to one of the most elite military units in the world. She had broken barriers that many people thought were impossible to break, but she had done so by focusing on performance rather than politics. The 12-year record that had been broken was not just about individual achievement, but about expanding the definition of what was possible in military service. Sarah had proven that capability and determination were more important than traditional assumptions about gender roles in combat operations. Looking ahead to her first operational deployment, Sarah felt confident that she belonged exactly where she was. She had earned her place on the team through exceptional performance, and she was ready to continue proving herself in whatever missions lay ahead. The young woman who had asked, "Can I take a turn?" had found her answer through dedication, courage, and an unwavering commitment to excellence.